Sophia Martinez had perfected the art of being a ghost. In the 8 months she'd worked at the Salvatore estate in Chicago's Gold Coast, she'd learned to move through rooms like smoke, silent, unnoticed, leaving no trace except perfectly folded linens and dust-free surfaces. She kept her eyes down when Marco Salvatore's business associates arrived in their expensive suits and barely concealed shoulder holsters. She never lingered when raised voices echoed from the study, when words like territory and shipment and problem floated through the heavy oak doors. She'd become exactly what the head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had told her to be on her first day. Invisible. It was survival. It was safety. It was the only way a 27-year-old woman with a high school diploma and crushing medical debt could earn $3,000 a month plus room and board in one of Chicago's most dangerous households. But tonight, standing in the small staff bathroom on the 3rd floor, staring at the garment bag hanging from the door hook, Sophia realized her invisibility was about to shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The red dress inside the bag seemed to mock her with its elegance. "This is insane," she whispered to her reflection. "This is absolutely insane." It had started 3 hours ago when Mrs. Chen had found her changing the sheets in the guest wing. "Mr. Salvatore needs you downstairs," the older woman had said, her expression unreadable. "Now!" Sophia's heart had dropped into her stomach. In 8 months, Marco Salvatore had spoken directly to her exactly 4 times. Once to ask if she'd seen his reading glasses, once to request his coffee be made stronger, twice to give a curt nod of approval when she'd worked through the night to prepare the house for important guests. He didn't summon staff to his office. He barely acknowledged their existence. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. When Sophia had entered his study, the inner sanctum she cleaned only when he was away, Marco Salvatore had been standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his back to her. Even in silhouette, he was imposing. 6'3" of controlled power, shoulders that filled out his custom suits in a way that made it clear he wasn't just a businessman playing dress-up. Marco Salvatore was the real thing. The heir to one of Chicago's oldest crime families, the man who controlled everything from the shipping docks to half the politicians in City Hall. At 34, he'd consolidated power his father had spent 50 years building, and he'd done it with a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless efficiency that made grown men nervous. Sophia had seen those men, had watched them sit across from Marco in his study, had noticed how their hands trembled slightly when they reached for their drinks. "Miss Martinez," he'd said without turning around. His voice was deep, textured with the faint remnant of an Italian accent from a childhood spent between Chicago and Sicily. "I have a problem." Sophia had waited, her pulse racing. Had she done something wrong? Seen something she shouldn't have? Was this the moment where invisible maids disappeared for real? "Tonight, I'm hosting a dinner," Marco continued. 20 guests. Business associates, some of their wives, a few investors from out of town. It's important. Critical, actually. The future of several territorial agreements depends on tonight going smoothly. He'd finally turned to face her, and Sophia had been struck, as she always was on the rare occasions she saw him up close, by how devastatingly handsome he was. Dark hair styled back from a face that looked carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, lips that seemed designed for cruelty, but occasionally curved into something that might have been a smile. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and when they focused on you, it felt like being caught in a spotlight. "My date canceled," he'd said flatly. 2 hours ago. A convenient illness, she claimed. More likely, she was paid off by someone who wants tonight to fail. Sophia hadn't known what to say to that, so she'd said nothing. "I need someone to fill the role," Marco had continued, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Someone who can sit beside me, smile, make small talk, play the part of a woman who belongs in that world, someone who won't ask questions or cause problems." The implication had hung in the air between them. "Sir, I'm not," Sophia had stammered. "I'm your maid." "I'm aware of what you are, Miss Martinez." Marco's tone had been dry. "I'm also aware that you're intelligent, well-spoken when you choose to be, and capable of learning quickly. Mrs. Chen tells me you have a college degree." Sophia's breath had caught. She'd left that off her resume, had buried that part of her past along with everything else from before. 2 years. she'd admitted quietly. I never finished. My mother got sick, and the medical bills. I don't need your life story, Marco had interrupted, though not unkindly. I need someone who can wear a dress, sit through a dinner, and not embarrass me in front of people who are looking for any excuse to question my judgment. Can you do that? Every instinct had screamed at her to refuse, to say she wasn't qualified, wasn't prepared, wasn't anything close to what he needed. But then she'd thought about her mother's latest hospital bill, about the collection agency that had started calling again, about the experimental treatment the insurance company refused to cover. How much? The words had escaped before she could stop them. Something had flickered in Marco's expression. Approval, maybe. Or respect. $5,000 for tonight, he'd said, plus a clothing allowance for the dress and accessories. You'll be paid regardless of how the evening goes, but if you manage to pull this off convincingly, there will be a bonus. $5,000. Sophia could barely breathe. That was almost 2 months' salary. That was another payment on her mother's medical debt. That was hope. Okay, she'd whispered. I'll do it. Good. Marco had moved to his desk, pulled out a credit card, and handed it to her. Mrs. Chen will take you shopping. You have 3 hours. Don't disappoint me, Miss Martinez. Now, standing in the staff bathroom with the red dress Mrs. Chen had insisted she buy, Sophia realized she had no idea what she'd agreed to. The dress was beautiful. She had to admit that. Deep crimson silk that fell to mid-thigh, with a subtle V neckline and delicate sparing straps. It was elegant without being overly formal, sophisticated without being stuffy. Mrs. Chen, who apparently had impeccable taste beneath her stern exterior, had also selected gold jewelry, strappy heels, and a small clutch. You need to look like you belong, Mrs. Chen had said in the boutique, evaluating Sophia with the critical eye of a general inspecting troops. Not like staff playing dress-up. Mr. Salvatore's reputation is on the line tonight. These people, they're wolves. They'll smell weakness immediately. What if I can't do this? Sophia had asked, panic rising in her chest as the sales associate wrapped the dress in tissue paper. Mrs. Chen had looked at her for a long moment. You've been invisible for 8 months, Sophia. Tonight, you need to be seen. Can you do that? Could she? Sophia stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a simple bun, hung loose around her shoulders in soft waves. Mrs. Chen had insisted she go to a salon, and now her hair gleamed with health and styling she could never afford on her own. Her makeup was subtle but transformative, enough to highlight her brown eyes and smooth skin without looking overdone. She looked different. Not like a maid. Not like someone who scrubbed floors and changed sheets. She looked like someone who might actually belong at Marco Salvatore's dinner table. The thought terrified her. Sophia slipped the dress on, the silk cool against her skin. It fit perfectly, hugging her curves in a way that was flattering without being inappropriate. She stepped into the heels, fastened the delicate gold necklace around her throat, and took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Someone confident. Someone who looked like she had every right to be wherever she wanted to be. You can do this, Sophia whispered to her reflection. It's just one night. Just a few hours. You can be anyone for a few hours. She took a deep breath, grabbed the clutch, and stepped out of the bathroom. The hallway was quiet. Downstairs, she could hear the sounds of preparation, caterers moving through the kitchen, staff arranging the dining room, the low murmur of early arrivals being greeted in the foyer. The dinner was set to begin in 20 minutes. Sophia made her way to the grand staircase, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. At the top of the stairs, she paused, her hand gripping the railing. This was it. The moment she stopped being invisible. She descended slowly, carefully, hyper-aware of every step in her unfamiliar heels. Halfway down, she heard voices from the foyer below. Male voices, speaking in rapid Italian. Told you this deal was solid, Marco. Baldini's people are committed. Committed until someone offers them a better price. Marco's voice, clipped and controlled. We need to make it clear tonight that working with us is the only option. Understood, boss. The men are positioned around the perimeter. Anyone tries anything, we'll handle it. Sophia recognized the second voice. Antonio, Marco's second in command. His capo. She'd seen him dozens of times. A tall man with cold eyes and a scar running along his left jaw. He was always armed, always alert, always watching. She reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped into the foyer. The conversation stopped. Marco and Antonio both turned toward her, and the look on Marco's face was something Sophia would remember for the rest of her life. His eyes widened slightly, almost imperceptibly. His jaw tightened. He'd been holding a glass of scotch, and his grip on it shifted, knuckles going white. He stared at her like he was seeing something he hadn't expected, something that had caught him completely off guard. Antonio's reaction was more obvious. His mouth opened slightly, his gaze traveling from Sophia's face down the length of the red dress and back up again. Not leering exactly, but appreciating, noticing. "Dio mio," Antonio muttered under his breath. "Boss, you didn't tell me—" Marco moved. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance between himself and Antonio, his hand shooting out to grip his capo's wrist. Not violently, but firmly, possessively. "Don't!" Marco said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Don't even look at her!" The words hung in the air like a threat. Antonio's eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. He immediately averted his gaze, his expression carefully neutral. "Of course, boss. My apologies." Marco released him, but the tension in his shoulders remained. He turned to Sophia, and when their eyes met, something electric passed between them. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice controlled again, but with an edge she couldn't identify. "You look acceptable." Acceptable? The word was so deliberately understated that Sophia almost laughed. "Thank you, Mr. Salvatore," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Marco moved toward her, each step deliberate and controlled. When he reached her, he extended his arm. "Shall we? Our guests are arriving." Sophia placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, acutely aware of the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. He was warm, and when he looked down at her, something in his expression made her breath catch. This wasn't the distant, cold employer she'd worked for over the past 8 months. This was a man looking at a woman, really looking. And Sophia realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that tonight wasn't just about pretending to be someone she wasn't. Tonight was about being seen by the one person who'd never noticed her before. As Marco led her toward the dining room, where crystal chandeliers glittered and expensive wine waited to be poured, Sophia understood that nothing would ever be the same again. She'd stepped out of the shadows, and Marco Salvatore, the most dangerous man in Chicago, had grabbed his own capo's wrist to make sure no one else looked at her the way he did. The question was, why? The dining room had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread. The long mahogany table gleamed under the light of 3 crystal chandeliers, set with china that probably cost more than Sophia's yearly salary. White orchids and elegant arrangements marked each place setting, and the scent of expensive food drifted from the kitchen. Seared duck, truffle risotto, delicacies. Sophia had only read about in the cookbooks she sometimes browsed during her lunch breaks. 20 chairs surrounded the table. 20 of Chicago's most powerful and dangerous people would soon occupy those seats. And Sophia Martinez, who'd been scrubbing this very floor last week, was expected to sit at Marco Salvatore's right hand like she belonged there. "You're nervous," Marco said quietly, his hand still warm where it rested over hers on his arm. They stood in the doorway, surveying the room before the guests arrived. "I'm terrified," Sophia admitted, because lying seemed pointless. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." Marco looked down at her, his dark eyes assessing. "But you need to hide it better. These people, they sense weakness like sharks smell blood. You show them fear, they'll tear you apart just for entertainment." "That's comforting," Sophia said dryly, and was rewarded with something that might have been the ghost of a smile on Marco's usually impassive face. "Here's what you need to know," he said, his voice low and businesslike. "The man sitting across from us will be Vincent Baldini. He controls the North Side. We're negotiating a partnership that would merge our shipping operations. He's smart, cautious, and paranoid. His wife Claudia will be beside him. She's the real power in that family. Vincent won't make a move without her approval." Sophia nodded, trying to commit the information to memory. "Next to Vincent will be James Chen, no relation to our Mrs. Chen. He represents several Chinese import businesses that need protection and distribution. He's been courted by at least 3 other families. Tonight, we convince him we're his best option." "How do I help with that?" Sophia asked. Marco's expression shifted into something almost amused. By being charming, intelligent, and utterly unfazed by anything you hear tonight. These men and their wives, they're used to arm candy. Beautiful women who smile and say nothing. If you can hold a real conversation, if you can show them you have a mind of your own, it reflects well on me. It says I value substance over appearance. Even though I'm literally here as appearance? Sophia couldn't help pointing out. This time, Marco definitely smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges, making him look younger and devastatingly attractive. Even though, he agreed. The doorbell chimed, echoing through the house. Showtime, Marco said, and the warmth vanished from his expression like it had never existed. He was all business again, all controlled power. Remember, you're with me. That means you're untouchable. No one will dare disrespect you. But it also means you represent me. Everything you say and do reflects on my judgment. Don't make me regret this, Miss Martinez. I'll try not to, Sophia said. And then they were moving into the foyer as Antonio opened the door to admit the first guests. The next 30 minutes were a blur of introductions and careful politeness. Sophia smiled until her face hurt, shook hands with people whose names she tried desperately to remember, and let Marco guide her through conversations with a subtle pressure of his hand on the small of her back. Vincent Baldini arrived with his wife Claudia, a striking woman in her 50s who assessed Sophia with sharp eyes before offering a smile that didn't quite reach her face. Marco, you didn't mention you were seeing anyone. How refreshing to see you with someone age-appropriate for once. The barb was delivered sweetly, but Sophia caught it. Marco's previous dates had apparently been younger. Much younger, probably. Sophia is full of surprises, Marco said smoothly, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on Sophia's waist. Which is why I enjoy her company. James Chen arrived with an entourage of 3 men, all of whom looked like they were deciding whether Marco's dining room would be easy to escape from if things went wrong. Sophia noticed Antonio and 2 other security personnel positioned strategically around the room, equally alert. By the time everyone was seated at the table, Sophia's nerves had evolved into something else. She was still scared, yes, but underneath it was a strange thrill. She was sitting at this table. She was part of this world, even if only for a night. And Marco Salvatore, who barely acknowledged her existence during normal working hours, kept looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup with truffle oil. Sophia waited, watching the others to make sure she used the right spoon, the right movements. She'd studied table etiquette in videos last night, staying up until 2 a.m. watching tutorials on her phone. So, Sophia, Claudia Baldini said from across the table, her voice carrying clearly, how did you and Marco meet? The table went quiet. Everyone was listening. Sophia felt Marco tense beside her, but she kept her expression calm. This was a test. She could feel it. At his home, Sophia said honestly, taking a sip of her soup. I was working, and we started talking. He has an impressive library. It wasn't a lie. Marco did have an impressive library, and Sophia had spent her few free moments over the past months sneaking into it to read during her breaks. She'd never thought he'd noticed. You work? Claudia's eyebrows raised delicately. I do, Sophia confirmed. Not everyone has the luxury of not working, Mrs. Baldini. The response was perhaps too honest, too pointed, but Sophia was tired of pretending to be someone she wasn't. If they were going to judge her for working for a living, then Marco had chosen the wrong person for this charade. But instead of offense, Claudia's expression shifted into something like respect. No, they don't, she said quietly. I worked 3 jobs before I married Vincent. Cleaning office buildings at night. People forget that. Vincent Baldini looked at his wife with obvious affection. She's never let me forget it, he said, and there was pride in his voice. Keeps me grounded. Marco's hand found Sophia's under the table, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture that sent electricity up her arm. He squeezed once. Approval, maybe. Or gratitude. The conversation flowed from there, and Sophia found herself relaxing incrementally. She listened more than she spoke, asked intelligent questions when appropriate, and discovered that underneath the veneer of danger and power, these people were just... people, complicated, certainly. Dangerous, absolutely. But human. James Chen asked her opinion on international shipping routes, and Sophia surprised herself by having thoughts on the subject thanks to a documentary she'd watched last month. Vincent's wife asked about books, and they spent 10 minutes discussing their favorite authors while the men talked business around them. But through it all, Sophia was hyper-aware of Marco. The way he sat beside her, his presence commanding even when he was silent. The way his eyes kept finding her, like he was checking on her, making sure she was okay. The way his hand would occasionally brush her arm or shoulder, small touches that felt both protective and possessive. And she was aware of the way other men at the table looked at her when they thought Marco wasn't watching. Appreciative glances, curious assessments. Antonio especially seemed fascinated, his eyes returning to her repeatedly until Marco would clear his throat quietly and Antonio's attention would snap elsewhere. It was possessive. It was primal. And it made something low in Sophia's stomach tighten with awareness. By the time dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate creation with gold leaf that seemed obscene in its luxury, Sophia had almost forgotten this wasn't real. Almost forgotten she was playing a role. Because sitting here, beside Marco, being treated like she mattered, like her thoughts and opinions had value, it felt more real than anything had in years. "I think the partnership could work," Vincent Baldini said as coffee was served, finally addressing the business that had brought them all together. "But I need assurances. The North Side has always been independent. I'm not interested in being absorbed into your operations, Marco." "I'm not asking you to be," Marco replied, his tone measured. "This is a merger, not a takeover. Your territory remains yours. We coordinate on shipping and distribution, share intelligence on threats, present a united front to the families trying to encroach from Detroit and Milwaukee, but you maintain autonomy. And profits are split how? 60-40. You get 60 on your territory, I get 60 on mine. Overlapping operations split 50-50. Vincent considered this, exchanging a glance with his wife. "That's generous?" "I'm not interested in squeezing you dry," Marco said bluntly. "I'm interested in building something sustainable, something that benefits both our families for generations. You can't do that by being greedy." Sophia watched the exchange, fascinated by this side of Marco. He was strategic, yes, but also fair. He wasn't just a violent criminal taking what he wanted. He was a businessman building relationships. "What do you think, Sophia?" Claudia asked suddenly, turning to her. "Should my husband trust yours?" The question caught everyone off guard. The table went silent. Sophia felt 20 pairs of eyes on her. Marco's hand tightened on hers under the table, a warning maybe, to be careful. But Sophia looked at Claudia Baldini, this woman who'd worked 3 cleaning jobs before marrying into power, and decided to tell the truth. "I think Marco Salvatore keeps his promises," she said quietly. "I think when he gives his word, he means it. And I think he understands that real power doesn't come from fear or force. It comes from loyalty. From people choosing to stand with you because you've proven you'll stand with them." She paused, meeting Claudia's eyes. "So yes, I think you can trust him." The silence that followed felt heavy, then Vincent Baldini laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "Well, Marco, you've certainly found yourself an interesting woman. All right, let's make this partnership happen." As the men moved into Marco's study to finalize details, Sophia stayed with the wives in the dining room, her heart still racing from the question she'd answered. Had she said too much? Overstepped? Marco hadn't looked angry, but he also hadn't looked at her at all after her speech. An hour later, as guests began to leave, Sophia stood in the foyer beside Marco, smiling and saying goodbyes like she'd done this 1,000 times. Vincent and Claudia were the last to go. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Claudia said to Sophia, and this time her smile was genuine. "I hope we see you again, my dear." When the door finally closed behind them, when the house was empty except for staff cleaning up and security doing final sweeps, Marco turned to Sophia. They stood in the foyer, the same spot where he'd grabbed Antonio's wrist hours ago, and the look on Marco's face made Sophia's breath catch. "You," he said slowly, "were perfect." "I wasn't sure," Sophia admitted. "That thing I said about trust, it's what sealed the deal," Marco interrupted. "Vincent told me in the study that his wife's approval was the only thing he needed, and you gave it to him. You gave it authentically, and Claudia believed you." He stepped closer, and suddenly the air between them felt charged. "The bonus I mentioned," Marco said quietly. $10,000. It will be in your account tomorrow." Sophia's eyes widened. "That's too much. It's not enough." Marco's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture so gentle it made her shiver. "You saved a deal worth millions tonight, Sophia. You represented me better than anyone I could have chosen. And you did it in a dress that made every man in that room forget to breathe when you walked by." "Including you?" The words escaped before Sophia could stop them. Marco's eyes darkened. "Especially me." The confession hung between them, heavy with implication. "I should go change," Sophia whispered, though she made no move to step away. "Go back to being invisible." "No." Marco's hand slid to the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "No more invisible. I don't think I can unsee you now, Sophia Martinez." And then he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle. It was hunger and possession, and 8 months of proximity finally exploding into something neither of them could control. Sophia's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Marco's arm banded around her waist, lifting her slightly so she had to rise on her toes even in her heels. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "This is complicated," he muttered. "Extremely," Sophia agreed. "You work for me." "Technically. This could end badly." "Probably will." Marco pulled back enough to look at her, and what Sophia saw in his eyes made her heart pound. Not just desire, though that was there, but something deeper, something that looked almost like fear. "I don't do relationships," he said quietly. "My world, my life, it's not safe. It's not stable. Women who get close to me end up hurt." "Then maybe you should let me go right now," Sophia said, even though the thought made her chest ache. "Before this goes any further." Marco's grip on her tightened. "I should," he agreed. "But I won't. Because tonight, when you walked down those stairs in that red dress, when Antonio looked at you like every man with eyes would look at you, I wanted to kill him for it. My own capo, my most loyal man, and I wanted to break his hand for daring to notice what's mine." "I'm not yours," Sophia whispered, but her body betrayed her, melting into his touch. "You will be," Marco promised, and it sounded like both a threat and a vow. "If you're brave enough to stay." Was she? Was she brave enough to step fully into this world, knowing the danger, knowing the risks? As Sophia looked into Marco Salvatore's dark eyes, saw the hunger and vulnerability and desperate need there, she realized the answer was already decided. She'd stopped being invisible tonight, and the man who'd forced her into the light was the most dangerous man in Chicago. But maybe, just maybe, that danger was worth the risk. The next morning, Sophia woke up in her small staff room with the taste of Marco's kiss still on her lips and the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on her chest. She stared at the ceiling, watching the early morning light paint patterns across the plain white surface, and tried to make sense of what had happened. The kiss, the confession, the way Marco had looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. After they'd broken apart in the foyer, Marco had stepped back, his expression shuddering into something unreadable. "Get some rest," he'd said, his voice rough. "We'll talk tomorrow." Then he'd walked away, leaving Sophia standing alone in her borrowed dress and borrowed confidence, wondering if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. Now, at 6 a.m, she had to figure out what happened next. Did she go back to cleaning his house like nothing had changed? Did she quit? Did she march into his office and demand to know what he meant by, "You'll be mine"? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Come to my office at 8 a.m. We need to talk. M." Of course he had her number. He probably had everything about her. Background checks, credit history, medical records. Men like Marco Salvatore didn't let unknowns into their lives without investigation. The thought should have bothered her. Instead, it made her feel oddly safe. Sophia showered, taking longer than usual, trying to wash away the confusion and fear and exhilaration of the previous night. When she emerged, wrapped in her threadbare robe, she found a box sitting outside her door. Inside was the red dress, professionally cleaned and folded in tissue paper. Beneath it was a note in Marco's sharp handwriting. "Keep it. It's yours. Everything from last night is yours." Sophia's hands trembled as she held the note. Everything from last night. Did that include the kiss? The promise? The way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered? She dressed in her usual work clothes, black pants, simple white blouse, hair pulled back in a neat bun, armor, protection, a reminder of who she really was beneath the red dress and borrowed elegance. At 7:45, she made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, most of the staff not yet arrived. Only Antonio stood in the hallway outside Marco's office, his expression carefully neutral when he saw her. "Miss Martinez," he said, his tone respectful but different from before. There was acknowledgement there. Recognition. "Boss is expecting you." "Antonio," Sophia said, stopping in front of him. "Last night, what Marco said about not looking at me was a warning I should have anticipated," Antonio interrupted smoothly. "I apologize if my attention made you uncomfortable. It won't happen again." "That's not what I meant," Sophia said quietly. "I meant, is he always that possessive?" Antonio's expression shifted into something almost amused. "No, Miss Martinez, he's not. Which should tell you something." Before Sophia could ask what that something was, the office door opened and Marco stood there, dressed in dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept much either. "Sophia," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Come in." She stepped past him into the office, acutely aware of Antonio's knowing look as Marco closed the door behind them. The study looked the same as always. Walls lined with books, massive desk cluttered with papers, the scent of leather and expensive scotch. But everything felt different now. Charged. "Sit," Marco said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Sophia sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Marco didn't sit behind his desk in the power position. Instead, he pulled the other chair around and sat beside her, close enough that their knees almost touched. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice caught Sophia off guard. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. I've spent my entire life building walls, maintaining distance. It's how you survive in this world." "Then why are you trying?" Sophia asked quietly. Marco looked at her. Really looked at her. And Sophia saw past the dangerous exterior to something vulnerable underneath. "Because last night, when you walked down those stairs, something in me recognized something in you. Like calling to like. And I can't ignore that, no matter how much safer it would be." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "Here's what I know. I know you're intelligent. I know you're working this job because you need money, probably for something important. I know you've been invisible in my house for 8 months, and I know it took you wearing a red dress for me to realize I've been noticing you the entire time." Sophia's breath caught. "You have?" "The way you hum old songs when you think no one's listening," Marco said, his voice low. "The way you rearrange my books when you dust them, organizing by color instead of author. The way you make my coffee exactly right without me ever telling you how I take it. The way you smile at Mrs. Chen when she's having a bad day trying to make her laugh." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear that had escaped her bun. "I've been watching you, Sophia Martinez. And now that I've tasted your lips, now that I've held you against me, I can't pretend anymore that you're just staff. You're not. You're something else entirely." "What am I?" Sophia whispered. "Mine," Marco said simply. "If you'll have me. If you're brave enough to step into this world knowing all the darkness that comes with it." Sophia's heart was racing so fast she could barely think. "I don't understand what you're offering. A relationship? An affair? What does mine mean in your world?" Marco stood, pacing to the window, his back to her. "In my world, mine means protected. It means no one touches you, threatens you, or even looks at you wrong without answering to me. It means you have access to everything I have. Money, resources, power. It means you become untouchable." He turned back to face her. "But it also means danger. It means you become a target for my enemies. It means your life is no longer simple or safe. It means you have to trust me completely, because in my world, hesitation gets people killed." "And what do you get?" Sophia asked, standing to face him. "What's in it for you?" Marco crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping inches from her. "I get you," he said, his voice rough with want. "I get to see you in that red dress again. I get to hear you argue with me when you think I'm wrong. I get to watch you exist in the world like you're not invisible, because you never were. Not to me." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I get to protect something that matters.
someone who matters. And Sophia, I need you to understand. I am not a good man. I've done things that would horrify you. I will continue to do those things. But I keep my people safe. I take care of what's mine. And if you agree to this, you will never have to worry about money or safety or anyone hurting you ever again.
It was a devil's bargain. Security and protection in exchange for stepping into danger. Wealth and power in exchange for belonging to a man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld. Sophia should have said no. Should have walked away. Should have gone back to being invisible where it was safe. But instead, she thought about her mother's medical bills, about the collection agencies and the fear that kept her awake at night, about 8 months of scrubbing floors and changing sheets and feeling like she was drowning in a life that offered no escape. And she thought about the way Marco had looked at her last night, like she was valuable, like she mattered, like she was worth protecting. I have conditions, Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marco's eyebrows raised slightly, but there was approval in his expression.
Name them.
My mother. She has medical debt. Collection agencies harassing her. If I'm doing this, if I'm stepping into your world, then that debt disappears. All of it. And her treatment continues. The experimental therapy the insurance won't cover. That's non-negotiable.
Done,
Marco said immediately.
What else?
I want to finish my degree, Sophia continued. I had 2 years of college before I had to drop out. I want to go back, complete my education. I don't want to be dependent on you for everything. I want my own path.
Done,
Marco said again.
I'll arrange enrollment at any university you choose. What else?
Sophia took a breath. I want honesty. I don't need to know every detail of your business, but I won't be lied to. If I ask you something directly, you tell me the truth. I can't be with someone who treats me like I'm too fragile to handle reality. This time, Marco was silent for a moment, studying her face.
That one's harder,
he admitted.
There are things in my world that are safer for you not to know. Things that could put you in danger just by being aware of them.
Then tell me that, Sophia said firmly. Tell me. I can't answer that because it would put you at risk. But don't lie to me. Don't treat me like a child or a possession that needs to be managed. Marco's expression shifted into something that might have been respect.
You're not what I expected,
he said quietly.
What did you expect? Someone easier. Someone who would just take what I offered and not ask questions.
He smiled slightly.
I should have known better. You've never been easy, Sophia Martinez.
Is that a problem?
No,
Marco said, pulling her closer.
It's the opposite of a problem. It's why this might actually work.
He kissed her then, slower than last night, deeper, a promise instead of an explosion. When they broke apart, Sophia felt like she'd crossed a threshold she could never uncross. So we're doing this? She asked, her voice breathless.
We're doing this,
Marco confirmed.
Which means you're no longer working as a maid. You're moving into the main house, into the suite next to mine. And we're going to have to tell the staff something.
What are we going to tell them? Marco's smile was dangerous.
The truth. That you're with me now. That you're under my protection. And that anyone who has a problem with it can find employment elsewhere.
It was arrogant and possessive and should have made Sophia angry. Instead, it made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. When do I move? She asked.
Today,
Marco said.
Right now. Antonio will help you pack.
And Sophia?
Yes?
The red dress? Wear it again for me. Soon. Because watching you in it was the most torturous and beautiful thing I've experienced in a very long time. Sophia felt heat flood her cheeks. You're very direct.
I've learned that subtlety is wasted in my line of work,
Marco said, his thumb tracing her lower lip.
And with you, I don't want to be subtle.
I want you to know exactly what you do to me. Before Sophia could respond, his phone buzzed. Marco glanced at it, and his expression immediately hardened into something cold and dangerous. What is it? Sophia asked, alarm rising in her chest.
A complication,
Marco said, his tone clipped.
One I need to handle immediately.
He looked at her, and the warmth from moments ago was gone, replaced by the calculating crime lord she'd seen glimpses of.
Go with Antonio. Get settled in your new room. Don't leave the house today. Understand? Marco, what's wrong? Sophia.
His voice was firm.
Trust me. Stay inside. Let me handle this.
And then he was moving, grabbing his suit jacket, checking the gun Sophia suddenly realized had been holstered at his back the entire time. He paused at the door, looking back at her. "Welcome to my world," he said quietly. "It's not always pretty, but you're safe here. I promise you that." Then he was gone, and Sophia was left standing in his office, her life irrevocably changed, wondering what danger had just walked into their newly formed world. Antonio appeared in the doorway minutes later, his expression grim. "Miss Martinez, we need to get you moved immediately." "What's happening?" Sophia demanded as Antonio led her toward the staff wing. "Why did Marco leave like that?" "There's been a development," Antonio said carefully. "Someone leaked information about last night's dinner. About you." Sophia's stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" "That Marco Salvatore has taken a woman under his protection. That he's shown interest in someone outside his usual social circle." Antonio's jaw tightened. "In our world, that makes you a target, Miss Martinez. Marco's enemies will see you as a weakness they can exploit." "So what does that mean?" Sophia asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "It means you're about to get a crash course in what it means to be protected by Marco Salvatore," Antonio said. "And Miss Martinez, it's going to be intense. But you're safe. As long as you follow the rules, you're safe." By the time they reached her small staff room, Sophia's hands were trembling. This was real. This was happening. She'd agreed to step into Marco's world, and that world had teeth. Antonio helped her pack her meager belongings. It didn't take long. She'd been living out of 2 suitcases for 8 months. As they worked, Sophia noticed more security personnel appearing in the hallways, armed men positioning themselves at strategic points throughout the house. "How many people work security here?" Sophia asked. "Normally, 6 during the day, 4 at night," Antonio replied. "As of 20 minutes ago, 15, and more coming." "Because of me." "Because you matter to Marco," Antonio corrected. "And what matters to Marco matters to all of us." They moved her belongings to the 2nd floor, to a suite that made Sophia's staff room look like a closet. It had a bedroom larger than her mother's entire apartment, a bathroom with a soaking tub and marble counters, a sitting area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. "This is too much," Sophia whispered, standing in the middle of opulence she'd only ever cleaned, never occupied.
"This is who you are now,"
Antonio said, not unkindly. "You're not staff, Miss Martinez. You're Marco's. Well, you're his. And that comes with certain expectations." A woman appeared in the doorway, mid-40s, elegant, with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. "Miss Martinez, I'm Elena. I'll be helping you get settled. Mr. Salvatore has instructed me to ensure you have everything you need." "I don't need much," Sophia started. "With respect, miss, that's not for you to decide," Elena interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Salvatore has very specific ideas about how you should be cared for. If you'll come with me, we need to take measurements." "Measurements for what? Your wardrobe. Mr. Salvatore wants you properly outfitted. You can't wear staff clothes anymore. It sends the wrong message." The next 2 hours were surreal. Elena took measurements, asked questions about style preferences Sophia didn't have opinions on, and made calls to boutiques and designers Sophia had only heard of from magazines she'd occasionally browsed in doctors' waiting rooms. "This is insane," Sophia muttered as Elena debated between 2 fabric swatches. "I don't need designer clothes." "Mr. Salvatore disagrees," Elena said primly. "And in this house, his word is final. Besides, Miss Martinez, if I may be frank, please, you're going to be seen with him now, at dinners, at meetings, at events where his reputation is on the line. Looking the part isn't vanity, it's armor. It tells people you belong beside him, that you're not someone to be dismissed or underestimated." Sophia thought about last night, about how the red dress had changed how people looked at her, how it had made her feel powerful instead of invisible. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, I understand." By early afternoon, Sophia's new room was filled with shopping bags, garment boxes, and the kind of luxury she'd never imagined owning. Elena had ordered everything from casual wear to formal gowns, shoes, jewelry, even sleepwear that was beautiful silk instead of Sophia's usual worn t-shirts. "Mr. Salvatore will be pleased," Elena said with satisfaction. "Now, there's one more thing. Your phone." She held out a new smartphone. Expensive, latest model, Nothing like Sophia's cracked old device. Marco wants me to have a new phone? Sophia asked, confused. For security, Elena explained. This one is encrypted, untraceable. It has direct lines to Mr. Salvatore, Antonio, and the security team. If anything happens, if you ever feel unsafe, you press this button here, and help arrives immediately. The reality of her new situation crashed over Sophia again. She wasn't just Marco's girlfriend or lover or whatever this was. She was someone who needed encrypted phones and panic buttons. Elena, Sophia said carefully, has Marco done this before? Taken someone under his protection like this? Elena's expression softened slightly.
Not like this, miss. Mr. Salvatore has had companions before, but he's never moved someone into the house. He's never assigned personal security. He's never,
she paused, choosing words carefully, never looked at anyone the way he looked at you last night when he thought no one was watching.
How did he look at me?
Like you were the most dangerous and valuable thing he'd ever held, Elena said quietly.
Like he was terrified of breaking you,
and even more terrified of letting you go.
Before Sophia could process that, Antonio appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. Miss Martinez, Marco's on his way back. There's been a situation. He wants to see you immediately when he arrives.
Sophia's heart jumped into her throat. What kind of situation?
The kind where you're about to understand why Marco Salvatore is the most feared man in Chicago,
Antonio said grimly.
And why you made the right choice in accepting his protection.
10 minutes later, Sophia heard the front door open, followed by raised voices. She moved to the top of the stairs, peering down into the foyer. Marco stood there, his white shirt splattered with blood that definitely wasn't his. 3 men were with him. 2 of his security team and someone Sophia didn't recognize. A man in his 50s with silver hair and expensive clothes, currently being held between the 2 guards.
You have one chance to explain,
Marco said, his voice deadly calm.
One chance to tell me why I received word that you've been asking questions about Sophia Martinez, about where she came from, who she is, what she means to me.
The silver-haired man tried to maintain composure, but Sophia could see fear in his eyes.
Marco, be reasonable. You can't blame me for being curious about your new companion. She appeared out of nowhere. She appeared exactly where I wanted her to appear, Marco interrupted. And your curiosity ends now. You go near her, you ask questions about her, you even think her name, and I will personally ensure you regret it. Am I clear? You're being irrational, the man said. One woman has you acting like...
He didn't finish the sentence. Marco moved faster than Sophia could track, his fist connecting with the man's jaw in a blow that sent him sprawling to the marble floor.
The next person who questions my judgment about Sophia will lose more than a few teeth,
Marco said, his voice carrying through the foyer.
Pass that message along. She is under my protection. That means she is untouchable. That means she is off limits. That means anyone who threatens her is threatening me. And we all know how that ends.
The silver-haired man nodded frantically, blood trickling from his split lip.
Get him out of my sight,
Marco said to his guards. Then he looked up, his eyes finding Sophia at the top of the stairs. The cold, dangerous expression vanished, replaced by something softer but no less intense.
Sophia,
he said, climbing the stairs toward her.
How much did you see?
Enough, Sophia said, her voice shaking slightly.
Marco, your shirt. Isn't my blood,
he said, reaching her.
And that's all you need to know about this afternoon. Are you okay?
Am I okay? Sophia almost laughed. You just beat someone up in your foyer because they asked questions about me, and you're asking if I'm okay?
Yes,
Marco said simply.
Because that man, Richard Castellano, is connected to the Baldinis. He was testing boundaries, seeing if I was serious about protecting you. Now he knows. Now everyone will know.
He cupped her face in his hands, and Sophia could feel them trembling slightly.
I need you to understand something. The world I live in, it's brutal. It's violent. People will test me. They'll try to use you to get to me, and I will meet every single threat with overwhelming force. Not because I'm cruel, but because it's the only language these people understand.
You're trying to scare me, Sophia whispered.
I'm trying to be honest with you, Marco corrected. Like you asked. This is my world, Sophia. This is what it means to be mine. I will protect you with everything I have, but I can't promise it will be pretty.
Sophia looked at this man, dangerous, violent, powerful, who'd just bloodied his knuckles defending her honor, who'd stationed 15 armed men around his house to keep her safe, who'd looked at her in a red dress and decided she was worth risking everything for. "I'm not scared," she said, and realized it was true. "I'm terrified, but not of you. I'm terrified of how much I trust you already, how much I want this to work." Marco's expression cracked, revealing vulnerability underneath. "It will work," he promised. "I'll make it work. You just have to trust me." "I do," Sophia said, rising on her toes to kiss him, tasting blood and danger and promise. "God help me, I do!" As Marco wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was something precious and unbreakable, Sophia realized she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She was his now, under his protection, in his world, part of his dangerous life. And as terrifying as that was, it was also the safest she'd felt in years. But their happiness was short-lived. Because while Marco had been dealing with Richard Castellano, another threat had been gathering in the shadows. One that would test their new relationship in ways neither of them were prepared for. And it was coming for Sophia tonight. The attack came at midnight. Sophia was in her new bedroom, unable to sleep despite the luxury of Egyptian cotton sheets and a mattress that felt like sleeping on a cloud. Her mind kept replaying the day's events. The blood on Marco's shirt, the cold efficiency with which he'd dealt with Richard Castellano, the way he'd held her afterward like she was the only thing anchoring him to humanity. She'd stepped into a world of violence and power, and there was no going back. A sound from the garden made her sit up. Not loud, but wrong somehow. A muffled shout, quickly cut off. Then, silence. Sophia's heart began to race. She reached for the encrypted phone Elena had given her, her thumb hovering over the panic button. But before she could press it, her bedroom door burst open. Not Marco, not Antonio. 3 men in dark clothes, faces covered, moving with military precision. Sophia screamed, but one of them was on her before the sound fully left her throat, a gloved hand clamping over her mouth. She fought, kicking and clawing, but they were professionals. Within seconds, her hands were zip-tied, a cloth gag secured over her mouth. "Target acquired," one of them said into a radio. "Moving to extraction point." They lifted her bodily from the bed, and Sophia's mind went into overdrive. This was real. This was happening. The thing Marco had warned her about, the danger that came with being his, was happening right now. Where was security? Where was Antonio? Where was Marco? They carried her through the bedroom toward the window, where Sophia could see a rope anchored to the balcony. They'd come from outside, scaled the wall, bypassed all of Marco's protection. But as they reached the window, the bedroom door exploded inward. Marco stood there, shirtless, gun in hand, and the expression on his face was the most terrifying thing Sophia had ever seen. Not angry, not violent, cold, absolutely, lethally cold. "Put her down," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Put her down and I'll kill you quickly. Keep holding her and I'll make it last days." The man holding Sophia hesitated for a fraction of a second. That hesitation cost him. Marco moved like liquid violence, closing the distance faster than should have been possible. The gun fired once, twice, and 2 of the men dropped. The third, still gripping Sophia, tried to use her as a shield, but Marco's hand shot out, wrenching Sophia away with one arm while his other hand drove a knife. Where had the knife come from? Into the man's throat. The attacker fell, gurgling, dying, and Marco caught Sophia before she could stumble, his arms banding around her like steel. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair, his hands working quickly to remove the zip ties and gag. "I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." Sophia couldn't stop shaking, couldn't process what had just happened. 3 men had broken into Marco's fortress, had gotten past all his security, had their hands on her, and now they were dead on her bedroom floor, blood soaking into the expensive carpet. "Marco," she managed, her voice breaking. "How did they—" "Inside help," Antonio said, appearing in the doorway with 4 armed men behind him. His face was bloodied, and he limped slightly. "We had a mole, one of the new guards. He's dead now, but he managed to disable the exterior alarms long enough for them to breach." "Who sent them?" Marco asked, his voice still that terrifying calm. He held Sophia against his chest, one hand stroking her hair, the other still gripping the bloody knife.
Castellano,
Antonio said grimly. Richard Castellano. This wasn't about testing boundaries. This was retaliation for the humiliation this afternoon. He hired contractors to take Miss Martinez, use her as leverage against you. Something shifted in Marco's expression, something that made Sophia's blood run cold despite being in his arms.
Get Vincent Baldini on the phone,
Marco said quietly.
Tell him he has 2 hours to deliver Richard Castellano to me, or our partnership is dissolved and the North Side becomes a war zone.
Boss, Castellano is Vincent's cousin.
2 hours,
Marco repeated, and the finality in his voice silenced Antonio's objection.
And Antonio? No one sleeps tonight. Triple the guards. I want eyes on every entrance, every window, every shadow. If a mouse tries to get in this house, I want to know about it. Yes, boss.
As Antonio left to execute orders, Marco finally looked down at Sophia. The cold mask cracked, revealing fear and fury and something that looked almost like pain.
I'm sorry,
he said, his voice rough.
I promised you safety, and they got to you anyway. I failed you.
You saved me, Sophia countered, her hands fisting in his bare chest.
You killed 3 men in seconds to save me. I should have prevented them from getting anywhere near you.
Marco's jaw clenched.
This is my fault. I knew bringing you into my world would make you a target, but I was selfish. I wanted you too much to let you go, and now you nearly paid the price for my selfishness.
Sophia pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. Stop, she said firmly. Stop blaming yourself.
I chose this, Marco. I chose you, knowing the risks. And yes, tonight was terrifying, but you kept your promise. You protected me. You came for me. I will always come for you,
Marco said, his forehead pressing against hers.
Anyone who touches you, anyone who threatens you, anyone who even thinks about hurting you, they don't get to live. That's my promise, Sophia. That's what being mine means.
If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang. Not the encrypted one, but her old personal phone still sitting on the nightstand. Marco grabbed it, his expression darkening as he saw the caller ID.
It's your mother,
he said, handing it to her. Sophia's heart dropped. Her mother never called this late unless something was wrong. With trembling hands, she answered. Mom? What's wrong?
Sophia, baby, I'm so sorry to call so late.
Her mother's voice was strained, frightened.
There are men here, at my apartment. They're asking questions about you, about where you work, who you're with. They're scaring me, Sophia. What's happening?
The phone was suddenly in Marco's hand. His expression had gone from protective to absolutely murderous.
Mrs. Martinez,
he said, his voice controlled but carrying an edge that could cut glass. This is Marco Salvatore. Your daughter works for me, and she's currently under my protection.
The men at your apartment are making a mistake. A fatal one. Keep your door locked. My people will be there in 8 minutes. If those men try to enter your apartment, tell them Marco Salvatore knows they're there, and they have exactly 60 seconds to leave before they're dead. Do you understand?
Sophia heard her mother's shocked intake of breath. Who are you? What has my daughter gotten into?
Someone who will keep both of you safe,
Marco said.
8 minutes, Mrs. Martinez. Stay inside. Trust me.
He ended the call and was immediately on his encrypted phone, barking orders in rapid Italian. Sophia caught words like Brooklyn, full team, and no survivors if they resist. My mother, Sophia whispered, terror clawing at her chest.
Marco, my mother. We'll be fine,
Marco said firmly, cupping her face in his hands.
I have a team 3 blocks from her apartment. They'll be there before anyone can hurt her. And Sophia, listen to me. This ends tonight. All of it. Richard Castellano wanted to send a message. I'm going to send one back. One that no one in Chicago will ever forget.
What are you going to do? Marco's smile was terrifying in its coldness.
I'm going to remind everyone why you don't touch what belongs to Marco Salvatore. And I'm going to make sure your mother is somewhere safe. Somewhere no one can use her against you. Can you trust me to do that?
Sophia looked at this man, this dangerous, violent, powerful man who just killed 3 people to save her, who was now mobilizing his entire organization to protect her mother, and realized something fundamental. She didn't just trust him. She was falling in love with him. "I trust you," she said. "Completely." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in organized violence. Marco dressed in all black, strapped on enough weapons to arm a small militia, and transformed from the man who'd held Sophia tenderly into the crime lord who controlled Chicago with an iron fist. Sophia watched from his office. He'd refused to let her out of his sight, as he coordinated responses on 3 fronts. First, her mother. Marco's team arrived at Mrs. Martinez's apartment building, neutralized the 2 men who'd been questioning neighbors, and extracted her mother to a secure location. Sophia spoke with her briefly on video call, saw her mother's frightened but unharmed face, and felt some of the terror ease from her chest.
"You're going to stay with some of my people for a few days,"
Marco explained to Mrs. Martinez with surprising gentleness.
"Nice people. Safe location. Think of it as a vacation. Sophia will explain everything later, but right now, I need you to trust that I'm keeping you both safe." "Are you her boyfriend?"
Mrs. Martinez asked bluntly. Marco's eyes found Sophia across the room.
"I'm whatever she needs me to be," he said. "But yes, I care about your daughter very much, which means I care about you too."
Second, the mole. Antonio had identified the security guard who'd helped the attackers breach the perimeter. Marco dealt with him personally, and Sophia didn't ask for details. Some things were safer not knowing. Third, Richard Castellano. At 2 a.m., Vincent Baldini called. Sophia could hear his voice through Marco's phone, strained and apologetic.
"Marco, he's my cousin. I can't just hand him over." "You can and you will," Marco replied coldly. "Or everything we built yesterday falls apart tonight. Choose, Vincent. Family loyalty or business sense. Because if you choose Castellano, you're choosing war. And I promise you, that's a war you'll lose."
Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "He'll be at the warehouse in an hour."
"Good choice,"
Marco said and ended the call. He looked at Sophia, his expression unreadable.
"I need to go handle this. You'll stay here with Antonio and 6 guards. No one gets in. No one gets near you. I'll be back before dawn."
"What are you going to do to him?" Sophia asked, even though she knew she shouldn't. Marco crossed to her, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes.
"I'm going to make sure he never threatens you again. That's all you need to know. Can you live with that?"
Sophia thought about the 3 dead men in her bedroom, about the terror of being grabbed, helpless, vulnerable, about her mother's frightened voice on the phone, about every moment of fear she'd experienced tonight because Richard Castellano had decided to use her as a weapon against Marco.
"Yes," she said firmly. "I can live with that."
Marco kissed her, deep and possessive and full of dark promise.
"When I get back, we're going to talk. Really talk. About what this means. What we are. What our future looks like. But Sophia, I need you to know something first."
"What?"
"I'm in love with you,"
Marco said, the words rough like he wasn't used to saying them.
"I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you walked down those stairs in the red dress. Maybe months ago when I first heard you humming in the hallway. But it's real, and it's terrifying, and it's the reason I'm going to do terrible things tonight to keep you safe. Can you accept that? Can you love a man who will burn the world down to protect you?"
Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks.
"I already do," she whispered. "I love you, Marco. Even the dark parts. Especially the dark parts. Because those parts keep me safe."
Something in Marco's expression broke and reformed. He kissed her again, then pulled back reluctantly.
"Wait for me," he said. "I'll be back soon."
And then he was gone, taking half his security force with him, leaving Sophia in his office surrounded by armed guards and the knowledge that somewhere in the Chicago night, justice was being delivered with Marco Salvatore's particular brand of finality. Marco returned at dawn, blood on his hands and exhaustion in his eyes. He walked into his office where Sophia had been waiting, unable to sleep, and the look they exchanged said everything that needed to be said.
"It's done," Marco said simply. "Richard Castellano won't be a problem anymore. No one will be a problem anymore. I made sure of it."
"My mother?" Sophia asked.
"Safe. She's at a property I own in Lake Forest. Beautiful place, full staff. She thinks it's a vacation home belonging to my legitimate real estate company. She doesn't need to know anything else." And us?
Sophia stood, moving toward him. What happens now? Marco caught her hands, holding them gently despite the blood still staining his fingers.
Now we build something real. You go back to school like you wanted. You finish your degree. You become whoever you want to become. And I keep you safe while you do it. That's all?
Sophia asked.
I just go back to normal life while you run a criminal empire? No,
Marco said, pulling her closer.
Nothing about this is normal. You're with me now, which means you're part of my world, whether you're in school or at dinner parties or anywhere else. But I want you to have your own identity, your own dreams. I don't want you to become just Marco Salvatore's woman. I want you to be Sophia Martinez, who happens to be with me.
He paused, his thumb tracing her cheekbone.
I want to deserve you. And the only way I can do that is by supporting everything you want to become.
Sophia felt her heart swell with emotion. I want to help people, she admitted. That's why I started college in the first place. I wanted to become a social worker, help families like mine who get crushed by medical debt and poverty. I want to make a difference.
Then you will, Marco said firmly. We'll set up a foundation. Use my resources, my money, my influence. Use all of it for good. You want to help families drowning in medical debt. We'll create a program. You want to support education. We'll fund scholarships. Whatever you want to do, whatever will make you feel like you're making the difference you need to make, I'll support it.
Why? Sophia whispered. Why would you do all that?
Marco's smile was soft, vulnerable, nothing like the cold crime lord who'd walked out hours ago. Because you make me want to be better. Because loving you means I can't ignore the good I could do with all this power. And because watching you shine, watching you help people and make the world better, that will be my redemption.
He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Sophia's breath caught.
It's not what you think, Marco said quickly. Not yet. We've known each other for 8 months, been together for 1 day. I'm not that presumptuous.
He opened the box to reveal a key.
This is to my Lake Forest property, the one where your mother is staying. I'm deeding it to you. It's yours. Whenever you want to visit her, whenever you need space from Chicago, whenever you want somewhere that's yours and not mine, it's there. No strings.
Sophia stared at the key, at this man who was offering her not just protection and wealth, but freedom and choice and respect. I love you, she said, the words feeling more real every time she said them.
I love you so much, it terrifies me.
Good, Marco murmured, pulling her into his arms.
Terror means you understand what's at stake. And Sophia, I'm terrified too. Terrified of losing you, of failing you, of my world destroying what we're building. But I'm going to fight for this. For us. With everything I have.
They stood there as the sun rose over Chicago, two people from completely different worlds who'd found each other through a red dress and a moment of recognition. The road ahead would be complicated. Sophia returning to school while navigating life as Marco Salvatore's partner, Marco balancing his criminal empire with his desire to support Sophia's dreams, both of them learning to trust fully in something neither had expected to find. But as Marco kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, Sophia knew she'd made the right choice. She'd stepped out in that red dress, and Marco Salvatore had grabbed his capo's wrist and declared her off limits. But more than that, he'd seen her. Really seen her. Not just a maid, not just a woman in an elegant dress, but someone worth protecting, worth loving, worth everything. And Sophia, who'd spent 8 months being invisible, had finally found someone who made her feel seen. 6 months later, at a charity gala for the foundation they'd established together, the Martinez Salvatore Initiative for Medical Debt Relief, Sophia stood beside Marco in another dress. This one was emerald green, and when she'd walked into the room, Marco had looked at her with the same possessive intensity he had that first night. You're staring, Sophia had murmured.
I'm appreciating,
Marco had corrected.
There's a difference.
The gala was a success, raising millions for families crushed by medical debt. Sophia's mother was there, healthy and happy, having received the experimental treatment that was now in remission. She'd made peace with her daughter's choice, especially after Marco had proven himself to be devoted, protective, and surprisingly charming when he wanted to be. As the evening wound down, Marco led Sophia to the balcony overlooking the city.
I have something for you,
he said, pulling out another small box. This time, When he opened it, there was a ring. Stunning. Perfect. The kind of diamond that caught light and held it.
I said I wasn't presumptuous,
Marco said, his voice carrying a note of nervousness Sophia had never heard before.
But 6 months of loving you, of watching you build something beautiful while standing beside me, that's long enough to know. Marry me, Sophia. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, supporting you, loving you. Let me be the man who gets to see you in beautiful dresses and comfortable pajamas, at charity galas and quiet mornings. Let me be yours completely.
Sophia looked at this man, dangerous, powerful, violent when necessary, but gentle with her, devoted to her, willing to use all his darkness to protect her light.
Yes,
she said, tears streaming down her face.
Yes, I'll marry you.
As Marco slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her under the Chicago stars, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. A red dress, a possessive grip on a Capo's wrist. 3 words that had changed everything. Don't even look at her. From invisible maid to cherished partner, from fear to love, from hiding in shadows to standing in the light beside the most powerful man in Chicago. It was a fairy tale written in blood and protection, darkness and devotion. It was imperfect and dangerous and absolutely real. And Sophia Martinez, who'd once thought she'd never be anyone's priority, had found a man who'd burn the world down to keep her safe. That was love in Marco Salvatore's world. Fierce, possessive, protective, and absolutely unbreakable. And Sophia wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.